It was a rainy Thursday evening, and the city was alive with the soft patter of raindrops and the golden glow of street lights. Andrea Taylor, holding a sleek black umbrella, walked briskly toward Renaissance Bistro. Her steps echoed with confidence, a reflection of the milestone she had recently achieved. She had just been promoted to head food critic for Metro Gourmet, the city's most influential food magazine. For Andrea, this night wasn't just about a review, it was a celebration of how far she had come. Yet, as she would soon discover, the evening would take an unexpected turn. Andrea's love for food was born in the modest kitchen of her grandmother, Miss Ethel. Growing up in a small southern town, Andrea often watched her grandmother work her magic. Miss Ethel could turn humble ingredients into something extraordinary: slow-cooked collard greens, sweet potato pie, or cornbread so light it felt like eating clouds. "Food is a language," Miss Ethel would say. "Every dish tells a story, and our story is worth telling." For young Andrea, those words planted a seed. She began experimenting in the kitchen, tasting spices and trying recipes from cookbooks she borrowed from the library. But it wasn't until high school that she realized food could be more than just a passion. One day, her English teacher handed her a copy of Bon Appetit. "You ever thought about writing about food?" the teacher asked. Andrea had never considered it before, but as she flipped through the glossy pages filled with beautifully plated dishes and poetic descriptions, something clicked. From that moment, she dreamed of blending her love for writing and her passion for food. Her path wasn't easy. At her predominantly white university, she often felt out of place in journalism classes and culinary workshops. Food writing, as she discovered, was dominated by voices and tastes that didn't reflect her upbringing or the diverse cuisines she cherished. Still, Andrea persevered. She started a blog called Soulful Bites, where she reviewed restaurants from her unique perspective, highlighting the flavors and experiences often overlooked by mainstream critics. Her reviews were heartfelt, vivid, and unapologetically authentic. Over time, Soulful Bites gained a loyal following. People loved her honesty, her ability to describe a meal in a way that made you feel like you were tasting it yourself. Eventually, her work caught the attention of Metro Gourmet, and the rest, as they say, was history. Now, standing at the entrance of Renaissance Bistro, Andrea was excited. The restaurant had a reputation for sophistication, and she hoped to find a gem she could highlight in her next feature. The space was warm and inviting, with golden lighting and soft jazz music floating through the air. Andrea closed her umbrella and approached the hostess stand. "Good evening," she said, smiling. "I have a reservation for 7:30. Andrea Taylor." The hostess, a young woman with a tight bun and an even tighter smile, glanced up briefly before turning to the computer. Her eyes lingered on Andrea, taking in her natural curls, her simple but elegant dress, and the confident way she held herself. "One moment," the hostess said, her tone lacking warmth. Andrea waited patiently, but she noticed the hostess whispering to a man in a tailored suit, clearly the manager. After a brief exchange, the man approached with a strained smile. "Ms. Taylor, I'm afraid there's been a mistake with your reservation," he said. "We're at capacity tonight." Andrea frowned. "I confirmed my reservation this morning," she said, her tone polite but firm. The manager glanced toward the dining area, where several tables were visibly empty. "Those are reserved for our regular clientele," he said. "Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at one of the casual spots down the street." Andrea felt a familiar sting in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd faced this kind of treatment, but it still hurt. She kept her composure, her voice steady. "I see," she said simply, turning to leave. As she stepped into the rain, Andrea's mind raced. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had been made to feel unwelcome in spaces where they belonged. She decided then and there that this review would be different. The next day, Andrea sat at her desk, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Speak your truth, but always leave room for grace. She poured her heart into the article, recounting her experience with honesty and a hope for change. Her tone was measured. She didn't resort to anger, but instead painted a vivid picture of what it felt like to be dismissed. She described the ambiance, the staff's demeanor, and the empty table she wasn't allowed to occupy. She ended with a call to action for the restaurant to reflect on its practices and consider what kind of legacy it wanted to leave. The article went viral within hours of its publication. Social media exploded with reactions. Some readers shared similar experiences, while others demanded accountability from Renaissance Bistro. The restaurant's owners issued a public apology, claiming they were unaware of the incident. Behind the scenes, the fallout was swift. The manager and several staff members were replaced, and the restaurant introduced mandatory training on inclusivity and customer service. Months later, Andrea received an email from the new general manager inviting her to return. The tone of the message was sincere. They wanted a second chance to make things right. Andrea debated whether to accept. Eventually, she decided to go, not for the restaurant's sake, but to see if real change had taken root. When she stepped inside Renaissance Bistro again, the atmosphere was different. She was greeted warmly, seated promptly, and treated with respect. The food was exquisite, the service attentive. Andrea wrote a follow-up article, acknowledging the restaurant's efforts to improve. It wasn't just a story about redemption. It was a story about accountability and the power of using one's voice to create change. For Andrea, the experience reaffirmed her purpose. She wasn't just reviewing meals. She was telling stories that bridged gaps, challenged norms, and celebrated the shared humanity that food could bring to the table. And somewhere, she imagined Miss Ethel smiling, proud of the woman Andrea had become.